market support was not adequate. Capital market support was not adequate for that, and I'm so happy to know, mashallah, alhamdulillah, we know that already the central bank Sukuk have, the government Sukuk and the central bank Sukuk have already worked on that, and it's already issued. So happy to know that, mashallah, Securities and Exchange Commission is also now working on development of Islamic finance products, including Sukuk. So I believe and I hope that, inshallah, Bangladesh can actually, to be honest, play a leadership role in Islamic finance. And mashallah, we have very good learned professionals coming from Bangladesh who are serving in different positions around the globe. We have, mashallah, found some very good professionals who also support at AAOIFI, very strong professionals, very learned professionals, either from Bangladesh as of now or originally from Bangladesh, who are part of our boards, our committees. Mashallah, they are contributing great for Islamic finance standard development. So I personally believe that it is a great country, a great opportunity for Islamic finance to learn from them. And inshallah, we hope that with mutual learning, for sure, in some areas, maybe we might be like, today we might be bringing some new things to you because you are not yet into this market, but we can be sure of it that inshallah in future we will be learning more things from you. I believe you have a very learned set of scholars and experts who are training you on this very important subject. I would like to congratulate our brother Zubair and his team from Alhuda CIBE, as they are doing a great job in developing Islamic finance around the globe. And I assure you again that our support from AAOIFI will be there. So with this initial remarks, I would like to use time for more important, because considering the subject and topic, I would like to take a little bit time on a very important topic, and particularly while you are developing Islamic finance as of now, and the market participants as well as the regulators are there, I thought that it is a good idea to discuss the update with regard to AAOIFI's standards on Sukuk in different areas: accounting, governance, Shari'ah. So I would just like to present a very brief overview of what AAOIFI has been doing in more recent years with regard to Sukuk, and how the Bangladesh industry and how the Bangladesh regulators can get benefit out of it. Bangladesh SEC and Bangladesh Central Bank are already in contact with the AAOIFI, and we have been cooperating on different initiatives in past as well. So we offer that whatever support you need on the regulatory side, on the governance side, on the financial reporting side, while our standards are available, and I'm going to give you a brief overview on that. But even otherwise, please consider that you always have access to us. You can always coordinate with us with regard to how things can be improved, how things can be, particularly, I would mention one thing in some of the good examples of Islamic finance. I would say that one of the best examples that we normally quote is that of Oman, that they have grown very fast in a very, very good manner, very stable manner at a very fast pace. And one of the prime reasons for their growth and their stability is that their initial governance framework, their initial adoption of AAOIFI standards and other international standards was very good. So they actually started after learning from others. This is a very good point. At time, you are a late entrant in the market, but being a late entrant gives you a privilege over others, because you can learn from their experiences. And I think this whole today's and tomorrow's workshop is all about that you can learn from the experiences that are there from around the globe, and how you can learn from those things, so that you don't start from day one. You actually start from day 100, or maybe you start a few years ahead of others, because you have that access to those knowledge resources, including in particular, I would say, the AAOIFI Sharia accounting and governance standards. So with that, I will share my screen if I'm allowed. Yeah. So I'll just take you through some very important aspects and overview of our standards, and if need is there, we can offer further details. So then further sessions can be held in future to support the Bangladesh regulators and the industry on the AAOIFI standards. So I believe my screen is shared and you all can see the screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
we can see you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for confirmation. So it's just about a quick overview about AOFI's comprehensive project on Sukuk. In 2015, AOFI started a very comprehensive project on Sukuk. It included originally an accounting standard and a governance and a Sharia standard, but later we increased the scope of the enhanced the scope of the project, and we, mashallah, considered multiple aspects, including governance, accounting, financial reporting, all these from the perspective of different stakeholders. So we actually originally started with an idea that we will be revising the Sharia standard number 17 investment Sukuk, which was issued in 2003, and the FAS 25 financial accounting standard 25 investment in Sukuk shares and similar instruments, which was issued in 2010. So the original idea was that we will be improving these two standards. But when we actually worked upon these areas, we came up with actually 5 standards, and I will mention about a 6th standard in addition to that as well, which is not the direct output of the Sukuk project, but which is also related to that. So for the purpose of the project, all the 3 technical boards of AOFI, including the Sharia board, the governance and ethics board, the accounting board, they have worked significantly on various aspects of Sukuk, and from that perspective, we have actually conducted dozens of technical board working group meetings, technical boards meetings. We have conducted multiple workshops. We have discussed the important issues related to Sukuk governance and Sukuk Sharia-based structures in our conferences. And those standards which are finalized or in the stage of finalization has gone through multiple public hearings in different parts of the world. So we try to make sure that we get the maximum input on this overall project from around the globe. The workshops, one of the workshop was conducted in Bahrain, one was conducted in Malaysia, one was conducted in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and public hearings of the standards that are already finalized were conducted in multiple countries. And as I mentioned, in multiple AOFI conferences, we discussed and we put on board a discourse on the major issues related to Islamic finance in Sukuk, the issues related to Sukuk, particularly some related to the legal aspects, some related to the rating aspects, some related to the structures, accounting aspects, regulatory aspects. All these aspects have been covered for the purpose of this comprehensive project, in which a number of experts and regulators and the market participants, lawyers, accountants, rating agencies, they all have provided us comments in different stages. So with that whole project, we have already issued some of the standards and some are being finalized. So there are 3 accounting standards. FAS 33, investment in Sukuk shares and similar instruments, which revises our FAS 25, has already been issued. FAS 34, financial reporting for Sukuk holders, is a very important standard, which has already also been issued. And there is an exposure draft of FAS 29, Sukuk issuance. This exposure draft is also finalized, but we have not issued because it has some link with the Sharia standard. And the Sharia committee, all our accounting standards are also reviewed by a committee of the Sharia board, so that these are aligned together. So the committee was of the view that we should take a little bit time in updating this one. So this will be like aligned. It will be made sure that this is aligned with the Sharia standard, which is still in pipeline. And after that, it will be issued, inshallah. But otherwise, it is already available and on the website, and I'll provide some insight into this. But this is not final; it is exposure draft. As I mentioned, we developed a governance standard on Sukuk, and it is a very important standard. And since regulators are also here, the Securities Commission is here, I would like to mention that this is a very important standard. You should keep an eye on the requirements of this one, either should adopt it directly or should make it part of your governance regulations with regard to Sukuk, because you will find it very useful. And so I'll give you an overview of these standards in the upcoming slides. So on the accounting side, the first standard I would like to touch upon is FAS 33, investment in Sukuk shares and similar instruments. That is the investor side accounting. Means that if you invest in Sukuk, what accounting you need to do. This standard is significantly aligned with IFRS 9, but whenever we develop our accounting standards, we make sure that we align them with the international standards, but we keep differences in two situations. Number one, when there is a specific Sharia requirement, then we do not follow the IFRS. For example, according to Sharia, a receivable cannot be discounted, or receivable or payable, which is the established receivable or payable, it cannot be discounted. It can be passed on or transferred only on a par basis. So it means that if there is a pure liability based sukuk, then it should not be discounted. So or it cannot be fair valued, because it cannot be transferred at a value other than that. So this is just one example to identify. The whole standard covers all these situations, but actually this is just one example to give that whenever there is a very important Sharia issue, that Sharia issue which is not addressed by the international standards, we make sure that this is covered in our standard. The second part is the specific characteristics of Islamic finance transactions, which is a very important thing, because Islamic finance is different from conventional finance. And if it was not different, then there was no need for having Islamic finance. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى, means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed, permitted trade and prohibited riba, interest. So it means that and later it says وَيَقُولُونَ إِنَّمَا الْبَيْعُ مِثْلُ الرِّبَى, means that there are a lot of similarities between trade and interest at times, but still this is what Allah has permitted and this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited. So with regard to that, there are specific characteristics of Islamic finance transaction that although Sukuk may have similarity with conventional bond, but they are not actually conventional bonds. They have different underlying structures at the back end. And this is what I believe that you are learning in these 2 days, that as to how these are structured and what type of structures are there. So I'll not go in detail for those structures. I would just like to mention that our accounting treatment in FAS 33 ensures that the principles and classification, recognition, measurement, presentation, disclosure, all these things are actually in line with the special characteristics of the instrument, which includes the characteristics of the underlying transaction structure and the characteristic of the underlying assets and the business which is there. So we actually in this standard have improved the accounting treatment. We set out these core accounting principles. We have defined key types of instruments for Sharia compliant investments and what are their primary accounting treatments. As compared to the earlier standard, our overall classification approach is in line with the business model, which is approach of the IFRS also. Similarly, we have certain classification choices which were not allowed by FAS 25 but were allowed by IFRS 9. We have allowed them. Provision for additional classification commensurate to Sharia requirements has been allowed to ensure conformity with accounting treatments. Specification of certain Sharia requirements, particularly monetary debt type instrument and amortized cost accounting, etc., have been identified. As I gave the example that whatever is monetary debt type instrument, that is established receivable and payable, it cannot be discounted. So how it should be accounted for, we have mentioned about that. Improvement in the definition of effective profit rate method. Conventionally in IFRS they use the effective interest rate method. We use the effective profit rate method. People will say there is no difference, but we believe that there is a one significant difference, because when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that it means that trade is permitted and interest is prohibited. So the return on economic resources, which is part of trade, economic resources may include assets, it may include goods and commodities, it may include entrepreneurship, it may include services and labor. So the economic resources are allowed to be priced. So those prices are the time value of economic resources and not the time value of money. So we have improved the definition of effective profit rate method or effective rate of return method, which are interchangeable definitions. Actually, Actually, there are some differences. I would just like to touch upon one difference, that, for example, if you issue a Ijara Sukuk, so in Ijara Sukuk, according to Sharia, if you consider it as a conventional bond, you will put the returns from the date when the cash is paid. While from the Sharia perspective, you are not entitled to any return till the time the assets subject to Ijara are available to the lessee and are in usable condition. So there might be a timing difference in our transaction counting as compared to the conventional one. So we have tried to keep similarity where it can be kept similar, but with regard to the timing of recognition of revenue, timing of recognition of expenses, with regard to recognition of rights and responsibilities of different parties, our treatments are at time different. So this is one of the important aspects that we have covered in this standard. We have developed a very good standard on FAS 30 on the impairment. So the earlier standard was providing some impairment details in the same standard, that is FAS 25, but now our standard refers to FAS 30, which is also aligned with IFRS. But there are differences like that. For example, under conventional approach, your bonds are subject to credit risk. But from Sharia perspective, Sukuk may be subject to a credit risk, but at times it may be subject to impairment because underlying assets are not in the nature of receivable, rather they are in the nature of asset and liabilities which are underlying, or a business which is underlying. So the accounting treatment for impairment versus expected credit losses, we have defined that part very clearly in FAS 30. And provision of detailed guidelines for the subsequent classification, etc., have also been provided. We also developed, as a part of the project, another standard on financial reporting for Sukuk holders. Now, this is a very important area because as of now, a lot of people consider Sukuk as equivalent to a conventional bond. So they are not concerned, or they are not made aware about what actually is at the back end and how those assets or business at the back end are performing. We put this standard as a requirement that all the Sukuk issuers must ensure that a minimum level, a summarized, a condensed level financial reporting is made to all the Sukuk holders, so that they know that it's not only about the net return that they are getting, but rather they are also aware about what is happening at the back end, like An-Nakhil Sukuk, like Dana Gas Sukuk. Lot of Sukuk you will find that the Sukuk holders were not aware about anything what was happening at the back end, or whether the assets are performing or not performing, whether they are generating any returns or incurring losses. Nothing was known to the Sukuk holders. So we say that it's a very important thing that the Sukuk holders must be made aware about what is the performance of the assets. So we put some minimum simplified version of financial reporting for the Sukuk holders. So this is another very important standard. The third standard on the accounting side, as I mentioned, it is pending completion of Sharia standard project on Sukuk, although the standard is finalized on the part of accounting board, but we are just waiting for the Sharia board to finalize the Sharia standard, so that we will issue. This is with regard to the financial reporting of the issuer or the originator, because the issuer can be at times SPV, so the originator. So Sukuk issuances, whenever these are issued, how these are to be accounted for in the books of the party that is actually getting benefit of the Sukuk money, or which is actually issuing the Sukuk, or originating the Sukuk as a better wording. So we believe that it should be accounted for based on the structure of the transaction. If the structure is establishing control over the assets by the entity, then it should be on balance sheet. If the control is not established, then it should be off balance sheet. So now what type of transactions would be on balance sheet or what would be off balance sheet? Whenever there is a principal agent relationship, that is a wakala based Sukuk or wakala bil istismar based Sukuk, it would generally be off balance sheet unless it is commingled with other funds. Restricted mudarba based instruments, not the unrestricted, restricted mudarba based instruments will also be off balance sheet. And according to Ijara under FAS 8, even Ijara Sukuk which is issued under the old standard, it is also considered to be on off balance sheet. But according to the new FAS 32, which will replace FAS 8, the new structures of Ijara Sukuk will be on balance sheet, whereby the usufruct of the asset will be recognized as a right of use asset. With regard to the On balance sheet structures where control is established, these will be classified in 4 different type of instruments: equity sukuk, quasi-equity sukuk, financial liability sukuk, and non-financial liability sukuk. Obviously, this is itself a subject in detail, and I believe that our time will not permit to go in these details, but I would suggest that that the interested participant should read this standard. All these standards, all AAOIFI standards and exposure drafts are now available on AAOIFI website free of cost. So you can always go there and always read the standards, including the exposure drafts, which are not yet final. So you can better understand how these structures are different from the conventional structures, and accordingly how these should be accounted for in the books of the originator. Then I would touch upon quickly on the Suku governance standard, and as I mentioned, it's a very important standard. This standard actually provides an end-to-end comprehensive Sharia governance framework from initiation of the Sukuk till its maturity, and it provides detail about key pillars of Sukuk governance. It sheds light on organs of governance and management which are there. It sets the eligibility criteria for the Sukuk issuer and refers to the regulatory and other standard requirements, including IFSB requirements. The standard also provides guidance on the consideration of appointment and function of different organs, including trustee, Sukuk Sharia Supervisory Board, the originator, the SPV. The standard stipulates the originators and other stakeholders shall ensure that the utmost level of transparency and disclosure. Those all requirements, as I mentioned, it's a quite detailed standard. All these requirements are mentioned in the standard in detail, and even as I mentioned, the regulator shall consider adopting the standard as it is, or otherwise they can consider adopting this standard as a part of their regulation, so they can take the important areas of this standard in their own regulations. But we would suggest that they should consider learning from this standard. As I mentioned, that it has been developed after so much detailed exercise, after taking input from global experts around the globe, considering a lot of significant issues which are there in Sukuk, and it is good to learn from others' experience. The standard is a stage-based standard, which means that it provides what are the requirements and responsibilities and obligations of different parties and different governance organs at different stages of the transaction. So it covers what is at the initiation and pre-commencement stage, including the appointment of organs and the issuance of prospectus, issuance of fatwa by SSB, what would be the minimum requirements of these prospectus and these SSB, etc. Then we mentioned that during continuity of the Sukuk stage, including ongoing functioning of SSB, Sharia board should not be involved only in the beginning by getting a fatwa on the paper. Rather, it should continue involved during the whole process, and there should be a Sharia audit and internal audit considerations, etc. We have provided some flexibility on these things as well in the standard, but generally speaking, the Sukuk shall be subject to an ongoing Sharia compliance function, including Sharia board's continuity and Sharia audits and internal audit and internal Sharia audit, etc. Similarly, a very important issue is when the Sukuk are restructured or are early terminated or are converted. So what would be the requirements, including the role of Sharia board and how the interests of the stakeholders will be safeguarded in case of restructuring, etc. And then at the end, about the maturity of the Sukuk transactions, that how the transactions are matured and what legal requirements and Sharia requirements and financial reporting requirements should be there towards the end of the Sukuk project. I would also quickly like to touch upon another standard, which is not part of the Sukuk project, but is also related significantly to the Sukuk project. 2 years back, we developed our first standard on Sharia compliance and fiduciary rating of the institutions, Islamic financial institutions, which is already issued and is already being practiced by some of the international rating agencies, particularly Islamic International Rating Agency. The second part of the project is developing a Sharia compliance and fiduciary rating standard for the Islamic finance instruments, and those instruments who will be subject to this standard, at least we can understand that 80 to 90% of those instruments will be Sukuk only, who will be subject to this specialized rating. Why this rating is necessary? Because conventional credit rating is about assessing the credit only, while the Islamic finance structures are not about credit. They are more about the underlying assets, underlying transaction, underlying business, and the risks and responsibilities, the ring fencing. There are so many factors that need to be considered with regard to the Sukuk's ability to repay. And additionally, a person investing in Sukuk is not only concerned about return, he is also concerned about having the return in a halal way, means that the instrument must be providing halal returns. So this is also a very important aspect that is covered in this standard, that what are the fiduciary responsibilities and what are the Sharia compliance responsibilities, and the Sukuk instrument should be rated in like other instruments on these basis. This standard is already in advanced stage, and we hope that the exposure draft will be issued by the end of 2021. The last but not the least, rather the most important, is the revised Sharia standard on Sukuk. We already have our Sharia standard number 17, but this was issued in 2003. The Sukuk market has developed significantly since that time. Lot of instruments that are mentioned in the earlier standard are not commonly followed, while there are a lot of new instruments which are there in the market which were not there at that time when that standard was developed. So in 2015, we decided to work on this a comprehensive project, and since then we are continuing our working, very comprehensive working on this standard. This will not be like a normal standard. It will itself, according to my knowledge, the draft of the standard is more than 100 pages, which is already halfway through at the Sharia board. The working group that was formed has worked for more than 3 years and have developed a very good draft of the standard. The Sharia board is presently reviewing this one, and a lot of additional aspects are being covered. So, and we hope that towards the end of this year, inshallah, we will be able to finalize this standard and as an exposure draft initially, and obviously will come for public comments. What will change and what you can expect from the new standard? Detailed guidance as compared to earlier standard means that for most of the structures, there will be more detailed guidance available in the standard. Coverage of new types of structures, including those based on new products, hybrid structures, tier 1 and tier 2 capital structures. So what major changes are there in the Sukuk market? Most of them will be covered by the new standard. And linking to other new Sharia standards, because there were some other Sharia standards that were amended, and they were amended or they were issued after our earlier Sukuk standard number 17. So there are some of the aspects that need to be updated and provided a linkage with in the existing standards. So with that, I would like to conclude my today's presentation, and I believe that it's already because it was started a bit late. The last ceremony was started a bit late, so it was, to be honest, it was it might be like a full day for all of you, but still, I may remain available if you have any questions. So I may remain available, but I believe that the time is already over. So with that, I would like to thank you again. I would like to thank Brother Zubair and his team at Alhuda CIBE again for inviting us and providing us this opportunity. And I assure the Bangladesh regulators again that we are always available at your service, and any input that you need from our side will be always available on a priority basis. And at the last, I would urge the regulators again that they should consider adopting these standards. Bangladesh Central Bank and SEC are considering adopting some of our standards, and some of them are already mentioned, but I believe that these standards are not adopted in Bangladesh. So I would suggest that while you are starting your Sukuk market, you should consider from day one adopting the best practices coming from the international arena. With that, thank you again. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you very much, Brother Umar Mustafa Ansari, for such a wonderful insight about the Sukuk industry and the work which is have been done by AAOIFI. And I believe that under the supervision of your kind visionary leadership at AAOIFI, you will facilitate very good option